We're in panel discussion. We have our panelists here, Mr. Koyebago and Mr. Kenneth, right? As I already said the first question, I'm going to say that again. So our first panel discussion question was, how long have you been retired? So I was asking Mr. Emmanuel Koyebago, how long have you been retired, sir?
Once again, I want to thank the management of Zenith Quantum Asset Management for the opportunity given to me to share my experiences after retirement. Um, I've been retired for 3 years, 5 months. 3 years, 5 months. February 27, 2017. For this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, I would like to find out as well, when do you think is the best time to start planning for retirement? I know based on your experience, I just want to find out, when do you think it's best to start planning for retirement?
I have said that question is driven by so many variables, but just to bring it to just compress it, I think it's important for us to know that the exit routes, which faces us as employee. My experience as an employee, I imagined out that there are three possible exit routes. And one, you plan for a voluntary retirement. There could be compulsory and sudden retirement, and there could be retirement by health incidences, either by way of disability or by way of sickness. In my case, as a person, I retired. I don't want to say it's voluntary, but it's captioned as voluntary, but it was sudden, and that makes you sit back when you want to advise somebody on when to start planning. You can now begin to see the reason why it is very appropriate to start early. Because you might be thinking in your own projection that I have X number of years ahead of me, and you'll be planning doing that. So if I say start as soon as you're employed, it looks unrealistic to a lot of employees. And if I say, well, you can start planning 2 years, 3 years to your retirement, it also doesn't tie up. So the advice is recognize that you don't know when and how you are going to retire. So you have to start planning early. So my answer to that question is that start planning early, because any of these three exit routes will face you. So, yeah.
If I could pick something from what he says, it says start planning early, because you never know when the door of retirement will start knocking.
Yeah.
Okay, I will ask the same question to Mr. Kenneth, right? When do you think it's best to start planning for retirement?
Okay, good morning, viewers. Thank you for joining us, and also for another, the second webinar in our series. To the question, I think I will align with Mr. Emmanuel for those in paid employment. So as soon as you start a new job, you are enrolled into a contributory pension scheme, and the law requires you start making contributions from your first paycheck. But for those who are self-employed, the likes of artisans, traders, someone who's just starting a business, it's a tricky question to answer. So for this group of people, when you are starting a business, for example, the predominant thought is that you want to raise capital for your business. That's one of the predominant thoughts. Customer acquisition is something that you also think of at that time. So at this stage of your business, you might not be making profits. So if we say, when do you start? The answer will differ from one entrepreneur to the other. But the most important thing I would say that everybody should take, if you are one of this category of people, that you are self-employed, you're starting a business, you are into trading, etc., is that you should start with a clear retirement goal in mind. So if you are starting a business from day one, you should also factor in retirement. What do you want to do for retirement? So one of your goals could be that 25% of my annual earnings, I want to set it aside for my retirement. So that's one thing you could do. But I aligned exactly with Mr. Emmanuel that you should start early.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kenneth Fry. I'm picking up that again. Start early. I think the point here is when to start planning for retirement. Start early. Start now. Okay. Our next question is, Mr. Kwebabu, what lessons have you learned during your retirement that you would like to share with your younger audience? And also, or to rephrase the question, if you had the opportunity to start life all over again, what would you do differently regarding your retirement?
Okay. I think I will, without veiling the question, I think those strategic actions that I took that didn't throw me off balance. Like I said, when I left work, it was sudden. And of course, I had about 5 years more to stay at my job as the CEO. So you can imagine the trauma that you just find yourself suddenly. But what guided me, what actions I took, and what lessons I learned, which I need to share, are into more like in 3 phases. One, my personal life attributes. I have never lived on debt. I've never lived on debt. I have never lived above my salaries and allowances. I'm not talking about my means, because I have to distinguish between my salary and allowances from my means. My means is the aggregate source. And my salary allowance, what that job pays me. So I live within, in terms of consumption, I didn't go outside my salary and allowances. Every other sources of my receipts as an employee were ring-fenced around certain projects, certain investments. They were never for consumption. So I brought that discipline into my family. So whatever we do, our holiday is for, if I can't afford it from my salary, there shall be no holiday that year. But every other benefits, extra codes, whatever, are ring-fenced around investments. So that helped me. That helped me. Then I also made sure that at the time I left, I had young children that were just 5, 4, and 3, and one that was 35. And the one who was at 35, soon after I left, God called him. He passed away. So the trauma of leaving office, the trauma of losing my senior son, all aggregated against the situation. But like I said, the personal attributes were very fundamental to me. When my children were going to school, it was a discussion I had with my wife. I don't put my children in school based on what I currently earn. I put my children in school on what I can afford after school, considering their children, their kids. So while some of my colleagues were going to British school, I chose Meadowhall. That I can afford even after leaving. So put it in this. So my attributes, I never lived on debt. I never lived above my salary and allowances. I never took any expenses that were far outside me, So those were my personal attributes. But in the course of it, when it was obvious that I've loved the job. There were 7 key things that I took and considered and worked on. 1, soon after the very first day I left office, when I got home, I sat with my wife. The first thing, she was down, naturally. Naturally, she was down. I sat with her, I said, my dear, don't worry. The statement I made, I said, we will never have a better yesterday. So I tried to bring hope back to her. And thereafter, I told her that I'll be having 2 weeks retreat. I want to have a quiet time myself. I was in Landmark Hotel here at Ojero for 2 weeks. And I tried to commune with God. So the first action I took was to go back to God. And I think, I'm not sounding religious, but I think it's very important because when you retire, whether voluntary or involuntary or whatever, what besets you is anxiety and fear, confusion, which way to go, how am I going to address it? So many things come across you, especially considering your social status. How am I going to maintain it? What's my family? So many things come across your way. So the first thing I needed to do was to go back to God. I needed the direction. So I had to go to hotel, stay in Landmark for 2 weeks, fasted and prayed. And at the second week, and I came back smiling. And I came back home. I called my family meeting, what I called my family board meeting. My wife and my senior son, who was working in Settlers, and 3 of us met. And I said, these are the things that I think I had from God. And we shared it, And so that message that was coming to me. Because if you say you will not, the anxiety is not there, I don't think that would be realistic. So I had to encourage myself. I had to make sure that I bring in positive message to myself, that I can never have a better yesterday. That's my slogan up to this morning, that I can never have a better yesterday. So I made sure that my psychology was fit, and I was optimistic that I was going to make it, and that I was able to defeat, the issue of self, and of course, the family, the peace, the joy, the encouragement, the prayer you need first is gotten from the family, and fundamentally from your wife. So I got my wife buy-in. I was very open. Even when they paid me my exit fee, I said, this is how much I got. So, and this is how we're going to go about it. So I got her buy-in into every of my action. And that's what I encourage any of these younger ones to do, because you can't get that peace outside home. Once you have the support of the home, especially your wife, and your children, then half of the problem resolved. Then after that, I talked about finances. That's key. My finances, I looked at it from 2 perspectives. One, my income and asset management, and my liability and expenditure management. Now, I looked at all my income. I wasn't talking about how much I had before leaving office, but I was thinking of growing future cash flows, because that's what is going to make me. The moment you focus on withdrawal tendencies, I have X million, and every month I'll be going to, you see, because for every withdrawal you make without any addition, you reduce your capital, you reduce the investment income, you reduce and you invite pressure to yourself as you see your fund going down. So I featured more on building cash flow. So And I reduced expenses that, as at the time I was working, I didn't consider them as liabilities. Two things that I did that almost affected my status was I looked at, I had a number of cars, and I said, I don't need all this. So two cars that were very genuine to me, Mercedes 450, brand new, and my Land Rover. I said, I can't be spending ₦1 million to be servicing a car, so it doesn't, I don't need it. And I have other cars, so I sold them off. I sold the two off. So I had to dispense with things I thought they were assets, but at that time they became liabilities, and I didn't need to start struggling with status at the convenience of my joy. So I disposed all of them, and I brought my Toyota brands, which I'm using up to today. So I looked at also my investments. When you're at work, you don't really have time to look at your portfolio. But after that, when I left office, I had to bring my portfolio and look at those that are performing, those are not performing well, those are optimally performing. And I had to rearrange my portfolio. I disposed of some shares and bought something. So I had to make sure that I had continuous cash flow. So instead of going to be withdrawing, So those were the things that I did in terms of my finance management. And of course, I had a family budget that I still have up to today. I have a family budget that I shared with my wife. She's the one, the internal minister. So I shared with her. These are the things that we are going to do. Excuse me. There are quite a number of things that will be inconveniencing, but we need to do it. This is my diesel management usage. I had to do this because when I was the CEO, my generator runs 24 hours. But after leaving, the question I asked myself, can I run generator 24 hours? Obviously, no. So I had to go get inverter, bought some rechargeable fans, replaced got my generators, and start to rationalize the usage of this. So those are some of the inconveniences that come with it. But the moment you get the buy-in of the home, then you have peace. So that was one of the things that we did. And when I was in platform during the oil crisis, I'm an accountant, I developed a budgetary control technique, which is called ARD, ARRD. And they stand on two criteria: issue of criticality of need and reasonability of cost. So I manage my home based on those two criteria. So if my wife comes with anything, how needful is it? If you say, well, we don't need it now, but the cost is good, then defer it. Because you have to spend the money on what is critical. So we looked at those. So I ran my home based on criticality of need and reasonability of cost. And we initially married an accountant is an issue, but after some time, she saw the realistic approach to it. So those are the issue of finance, and for the sake of time. So if it is reasonable and it's critical, then I approve of it. If it is reasonable and not critical, then I defer it. If it is not reasonable in my assessment and the cost is high, I reject it. So if it is critical, if it is not critical or reasonable, then of course I defer. So that's the ARRG. So that is what the philosophy we use in running. And I still think that it's good for whether you are working or you are retired, it's still good to apply those, so that you don't expose your children to so much luxuries, because I still say that you still don't know how you are going to exit. Now, after the family, the next one is work. From day one, from the very day I left the office here till now, I've never stayed at home when an accountant don't have anything to do. The following day, I got myself ready. I went to share office with my wife, and I got a corner before I bought my office. So I made sure that I was never at home lamenting on what it was yesterday. I immediately defeated the side and moved ahead and knew that I was going to be at work. I was developing a farm, but of course I thought my son who died he was running it before. But so I've always had mind of going to training and all that, you know. So from that moment to this day, I have always been at work. And the advice is don't retire and go home in the morning to go and buy me newspaper and read it, you know. Get something to do. You are still active. It's just a change. You are just changing job from what you were to the present job. So don't compartmentalize that idea that you have retired and the next thing you can do is go and buy me a newspaper and let me read. And no, make yourself active. And I'm busier now. Apart from running my Sebla, I'm in energy consulting. I'm in pharma. I belong to one or two boards in the companies. I'm finance committee chairman of one or two, three companies. So I'm busier now. And the joy is that they are my own thing. And I spend the time for my own thing. So after work, the next major thing I look at, blessing, is our health. In retirement, you consider your health. It's one of the sources of anxiety. How is your health? How do you have access to medical facility? Can you fund it and all that? So you also look at all those areas and see how you can plan about it. And of course, your physique, your physical state. The moment you begin to wake up in the morning and sit down at home and be reading newspaper, you invite sickness. So if you retire, always make sure that, first of all, the mind is busy. Yesterday, I had a board meeting of my company. Yesterday. After today, by Sunday, I'll be submitting a project I'm writing for my next, I'm running an MBA program again. So I keep myself busy. I read a lot. Even with this COVID-19, I've created an office in my house that I go twice to the office and stay 3 days at home in my office. So you keep yourself busy. You don't have to start thinking that you're retired. So I advise everyone, any one of us, the younger ones, to make sure that they keep themselves busy physically. Engage in exercise. Like I tell my wife, sometimes I engage because she does her exercise as if she is going for Olympics, and I said, no, that is not my style. But I take time out to exercise. And then finally, in these 7 pillars, is just managing your social status. You know, I was a CEO and a GMD. I had dined here and there, locally and internationally. That is an obvious challenge that you're going to manage. But your mind, it is what you tell your mind that, you know, gives you the victory. So it is about managing my social status. And I felt the only way you can mismanage your social status is to devalue yourself. And once you didn't devalue yourself, then your social status will be on a cruise line. So I was able to look at it because I have to engage myself in study. I'm still maintaining my relationship in the oil and gas. I'm still studying. I'm still making new friends in different industries. I'm still hanging out before the COVID-19. I have a group that I call C5. That CEOs. We hang out weekends, enjoy ourselves, make sure that we laugh all the time. We play our local music, we play all the kind of music, we dance, make sure that we're happy. And I think with that, you just get going and be joyful in your retirement.
Thank you so much, sir. A lot we have learned in that.
But the negative,
your
the
question.
third one, sorry, just one point. The third one is it always brings me back to your exit route, to the exit routes. You know, like I said, you can only think of, oh, I'm going to retire this way, but you don't know when it is until it comes. So the only pain is that if I had known, then I would have started much earlier. But that is the pain. But when it came, I had no choice than to face the consequences and try to show that I'm out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Koibago. A lot has been learned. I learned for firsthand that live your life debt-free. Don't live above your allowances or your salaries. Okay, Mr. Kenneth, I just want you to add something to that. Not any long thing, but just, what advice you give based on your own experiences. What advice would you give to the younger generation on planning for retirement?
Okay, obviously I don't have the benefit of being retired.
Yeah.
But even though I have some few gray hairs, I would say that the lesson I would share is that from the time I've spent in investments since 2007, what I've seen is that the best investing plans for any purpose or any goal you want to achieve are plans which are automatic. So you set up a systematic investment plan, which could be in the form of a direct debit to your account. So you mandate your bank to deduct certain amounts of money from your account towards your savings. So those plans are usually the best plans, and they go a long way in forming habits which will last until retirement. So like Mr. Emmanuel shared, that you have to be growing your assets even though you're in retirement. So you have to create a systematic plan that helps you all the way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kenneth Bryce. So a systematic investment plan. Okay. Mr. Koibago, I would like to ask, how much money do you estimate one needs to set aside to have a blissful life in retirement? So is there a particular figure, an amount of money that you should have?
Well, I think that's one of the I think of these questions that you have asked, that's more like the most challenging. Yeah. Again, how much you have is also driven by some factors. First of all, your social status, your family structure, the age of your children, what do you want, what do you envisage to have as well for retirement years? So these put together determine with more or less mold your investment plan. But when I still in the office, things that I always think of, especially when I'm traveling. I travel first class, and I begin to ask myself, when I retire, can I really fund this
Lifestyle.
So I say, but at least, so I console myself, well, if I can't afford, I can business class. So these are things that will form but I targeted that if I can be able to have as my pension benefit 60% of what I'm earning, plus my other sources aggregating together, then I think I should have, something. But you see, there are also some factors that are outside your control, completely outside your control. I left office February 2017. My son took ill August 2017 and died February 7th, 2019. Between August 2017 and February 2019, thank God for Seplat. Without being immodest, close to 30-40 million have gone into his health management. So how could you have planned that at work? Because he was early when I was in the office. But suddenly he took it. There's no way you could have said that at the office and let me save the server. So the known fact is that there is no amount. That's why my emphasis when I left was how to grow future cash flow. So with the money I was paid plus what I had, I made sure that properly invested. You know, very properly invested. I think you guys have some part of that. You know, so and I want to thank Zenith for asset management. I mean, especially with all respect to her, she's wonderful in managing my assets, and it keeps me getting on. So the issue is not really for me. It's not really about the quantum of money that you have, but the philosophy of growing future cash flows. So maximize your assets, maximize your income. I never leave I don't have any idle fund, not anywhere. There's no basis for it. So from my budget, I know how much I'm going to spend. Every other thing must either be one income generating as an investment platform or the other. You know, some weekend on Fridays, I will write my bank. Please transfer it into it. You call account. 7 days, and whatever it is. Anything greater than 0 has value. So whatever I'm not using now goes into an income yielding system. Anything greater than 0 has value. That's my investment philosophy. So I'm not going to wait until it earns me 1 million. You know, if you can give me 30,000 naira in a day and I can use it to buy diesel, it has added to me. So I try to ensure that I don't have any idle funds living anywhere. You know, but in terms of my other sources of fund, rent, dividends, this thing, they are far from my consumption portion of life. So I always target ring-fence it. It's okay, this man is going to pay so. There are so many properties in the estates, 14 million, 20 million. You aggregate them, put them in the pool, and you throw it into a well investment. Before you know it, that one start earning. So that is how I'll be managing, and that's what I want to advise. Because if you say, let me have 100 million, you don't know what can come and pick up the 100 million. Yeah. So it's better to have good saving. I doubled my voluntary contribution, you know, when I was in the company. I said, apart from my compulsory saving, my voluntary contribution was even more than what I was contributing. And by the time I left office and I went to IBTC, I said, what is this? And so when I collected it and gave it out to some places to invest, it made a lot of sense. So my advice also is, yes, before you know it, you get used to it. When they start deducting 100,000, 200,000, before you know it, you start getting used to it. But at the end of the day, when you want to you see the quantum of it, and it will be of great service.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Kwebega. Our time is fast spent. Yes. But I could pick from what you said about the systematic investment plan. You mentioned that putting something aside every time. He said something, he said anything above 0 is value, is a lot of value. So, Mr. Ken, I'll just ask you our final question before I think we would only be able to entertain one live question because our time is fast spent. But I would like to ask, what investment plans and vehicles, Mr. Kennebury, do you think would help planning for your retirement? So what investment plans, vehicles, would you think would help with planning for retirement?
Okay, obviously for the saving for retirement today, it's a well-structured system compared to what we used to know in the past. So since the Pension Act of, I think that was 2005, when the pension scheme came about, we have had contributory pension schemes. Recently, last year, they launched the micro pension scheme. So for those who are traders, artisans, and they could also put funds aside for retirement. People also, Mr. Emmanuel just mentioned some. You could go into real estate, buy properties, and now get the cash flows from those properties as future income for yourself. So those are the standards which you should look at.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kenneth Bry. Okay, let me just take one live question, because after this, we're still going to have the presentation by our head investment management team, and he's going to talk to us really about how to plan your retirement in terms of investment vehicles you could invest in and what plans you need to take and all. So let me just take one live question before that session starts. Okay, so we have a question from Okay, someone has a question here. He says, what investment vehicles, and that's just going back to you. He says, right now, the inflation rate is around 12.56%. What investment vehicles can we plug into right now that at least will help you hedge inflation? So that question is from Mr. Usaini.
Well, that's a very difficult question, especially at this time. So like he alluded to, inflation rate is 12.56%, which means that you are eroding value if you compare inflation at 12.65% to what the Treasury bills rate is doing currently, you find out that you are actually eroding value rather than creating value. Yeah. So it's tricky. The only real estate, I think I would say real estate is the best option to go. That's what a lot of people, in terms of inflation protection, that's what a lot of people allude to. But what I tell people that there's a cost for doing nothing. So if you say because inflation rate is at 12.56% and you try not to save, you're still going to erode that completely 12.56%. Yeah. But if you save, then you knock off at least the value that will be eroded will be much smaller.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kenneth Bry. Okay, our time is really fast, man. This is already 10:53. Okay, let me just ask one more question. Okay, so someone has a question. I'm going to throw this question to Mr. Emmanuel Koibago. He says, this question is from Daniel. How does an employee in a paid job who sets up a business in his current profession in anticipation of retirement deal with the issue of conflict of interest with his employer? So he says he's currently in a paid employment. He then decided to set up a business, almost like what he's doing, just to take care of his retirement. So he's asking, how does he take care of the aspect of conflict of interest?
First is if what is setting up is the same line of business with his current employer, that's obvious conflict of interest, and that's a big risk. And that's when it's discovered by the employers, he faces any of those exit routes, either termination and sudden, and that could even be worse because he may not even go with any benefit. So that's a risk of his own, which I don't advise. But I do advise that you can set up something different from what your current employers are doing, so that and get somebody to be running it. When I was in platform, I had my C3V business, but I wasn't running it. I employed one accountant. I sent him here, running there. And when I left office, that was the first place I sat down. So I don't see anything absolutely out of it getting somewhere in preparation for your exit. But the moment you begin to work in the same field with your current employer, that's obvious a conflict of interest. And of course, the conflict of interest policy is very clear in many companies. If you find it, then of course, there are consequences that are before you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kwenyebago. Mr. Kennedy, would you like to add anything to that question, or should just end it there?
I think the question, he has answered the question clearly.
All right. Okay. I think we've come to the very end of this session. I would really want to appreciate Mr. Emmanuel Kwenyebago for your time. You didn't have to be here. I just called you and here you are giving us your story. Thank you so much, sir. We really, really, really appreciate you. God bless you real good. Mr. Kenneth Bry, I also want to really appreciate you, boss. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us as well. Thank you so much. All right, so I'll introduce our next speaker.
Take a break.
Okay, we'll take a short break so that I can introduce our next speaker. That will be the one, he will be the one talking to us about planning for our retirement.
Okay.
Thank you for holding on and welcome to the second session of this webinar. I understand that we have spent a lot of time, but I promise you'd enjoy this second session. Okay, this second session is a presentation by our head investment management here at Quantum Zenith Asset Management. His name is Ikechukwu Iheanacho, and he has over 12 years experience in the banking, oil and gas industry. He has worked both in Kenya and in Ghana, and here he's working with us here at Quantum Zenith Asset Management. Without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Ikechukwu Iheanacho.
Thank you very much, Teniola. Good morning, everyone. Yes. So plan for retirement. I would like to share my screen, first of all, for the presentations. Okay, so plan for retirement. You're not getting any younger. Would like to start with a poll question, please. Sorry. Yes. So starting, when is the right time to start planning for retirement? I would like to get the view of our participants, and a poll will be launched right about now to share that. Oh, poll, yes. So a poll was just shared. When is the right time to start planning for retirement? I would like to get your views, your thoughts. Option A, as soon as you get a job, as soon as you pay off mortgage on your own home. Oh, okay, apologies. I see that the options for this poll question were mixed up. But if we end the polling, yeah, so the results came in unanimously as soon as you get a job. But obviously that's because there were some mix-ups in the options, so we do apologize for that. Now, it is agreed that as soon as possible, we heard Mr. Kwenyebago say, as soon as possible, as soon as one starts earning an income is the best time to start planning for retirement, right? And we go over to another question. So why plan for retirement now? I mean, why now? Why not when I'm closer to retirement? And there are three thoughts that, that we've put together. One is the fact that these days, a number of individual families start late, so starting out life late. most of us like to go through a phase in life. From your early days, you graduate, you get a job, you settle down, start to raise a family. And the trends in recent times is that these started later than usual. I mean, our parents sometimes started their families in their early or even mid-20s. These days, we don't see the same. So starting late has its implications financially. It means that when one would have been closer to retirement, one might still find themselves having to, for instance, pay children's school fees in university instead of just having been done with that phase and deciding what you want to do with your money. Another reason is longevity. So yes, we all pray for long life, and it's a good thing to have a nice long life. One of the implications there also is that there will be an elongated need to sustain oneself, sustain one's endeavors generally. And with longevity comes those financial needs. And for that reason, it's important to start planning now as against later. And a third reason, Mr. Koeberg also pointed to that a bit, is medical expenses. So as we get older, there's the likelihood to have increasing health management obligations, health management needs. And if one is not adequately prepared to meet those, you may find yourself in a mix and in some financial difficulty in the later stages of life. So what kind of retirement are you looking forward to? This isn't a poll question, but obviously a number of us have come across on the newspapers, on TV, see some retirees on some queues waiting for their benefit payouts. We see some even collapsing on these queues. Very heart breaking indeed. And we certainly do not want this kind of retirement. I mean, on the other hand, we would have come across visions or pictures of some retirees on a yacht somewhere, just sailing out into the sunset, or just cruising on the beach, or any idea anyone has of financial freedom in retirement. So we certainly know which of the two scenarios we prefer. We would prefer to have a retirement where we are financially free to do what we will, what we like. And that is a third reason why one should start planning for retirement earlier. So do we have clear retirement stage financial goals? So financial goals are any goals that have financial implications, that have a cost, basically. And in the earlier years, we have a few of those: buy a car, get married, further education. So the retirement phase financial goals are those that pertain to the later years of life. So for instance, building a nest egg for retirement, or set up an education fund for children. Education these days in Nigeria is quite costly, and it's something that we should probably start planning sooner than later. Start my own business. You know, that may be a long-term plan. There's an increasing trend that a lot of people like to retire, then start a business. And I saw a poll, a question where someone said, is it really necessary that we have to look for a business to do after retirement? Again, the answer to that is no, if we just address it now. So that's why on one hand, one might consider starting a business if you have the business acumen, if you have the business ideas, if the environment is conducive for the business. But not everyone can go into business. Not everyone wants to go into business. So there is the option of simply setting aside some investments that will grow even while you're working. And again, just to avoid the issue of conflict of interest with one's employer that was discussed earlier as well. So if you just build a nest egg, which fund managers like us help you to grow, upon retirement, you just simply enjoy the dividends of your investment and be free to do what you want to do with your time. So we'll take a second poll question now. Sorry. How do I go back? Okay, yes. Poll question 2, hope this was done. Yes, so the options in this were good. Poll question 2, let me share that, sorry. What retirement stage financial goals have you set out? We'll please like to see your thoughts. Option A, education fund for children. B, pay off mortgage, own your home. C, start your own business. D, investment portfolio for passive income. We would like to give you like 20, 30 seconds to address this. Poll will run for a few more seconds and then we would consolidate the results. Okay. And polling. Yes, so we see the results. Majority of us have set out investment portfolio for passive income in retirement. And that's very reasonable. So that's a good way to augment one's retirement savings. We will touch a bit on that later. But again, as we see, not all of us really skewed towards starting your own business in retirement. I mean, so some would agree that that's not necessarily the best time to start trying to be creative and new. Those who have a passion for business would have started earlier rather than later as well. So investment portfolio for passive income in retirement is great. Thank you. Okay, so we look at very quickly the investment life cycle. We all go through these stages in life, starting with the accumulating phase. From our 18s to 29 years old, thereabout, that's when we're just starting out with our careers or with our business. And income is typically at its lowest in that stage. This is followed by the consolidating phase, about 30 to 59 years old. Income is significantly higher at this phase than in the accumulating phase. And this phase is characterized by savings. So your primary goal here is to save towards retirement. Risk tolerance is moderate at this phase. So this just shows the kind of financial and investment behaviors that we might say is best to properly plan for retirement, because it's followed by the decumulating phase from 60 years onwards. So the decumulating phase we see starts where income is at its peak. And it's typically the trend that right after retirement, income starts to decline. So the idea is that as much as possible, we should have exhausted our significant financial expenses or cash outflows before getting to the decumulating phase. Because once we get to that phase, income is on a decline, and you wouldn't want some new expenses to be coming up right around the time where income has started to decline. That leads to financial discomfort in later years. Another way to depict the investment life cycle is this simple chart we have here. You see the consumption. So in the earlier years of one's life, consumption is higher than income, of course, because you start out by not earning any income. Then there's a window, there's a phase in our lives where income is higher than consumption. And this is the window where I believe most of us will find ourselves. And we are to be doing significant savings and investments during this window, because that's going to be followed by a phase where, again, consumption comes to be higher than income. So what are you doing with this time when, what are you doing with your resources this time where income is higher than consumption? Have you been making significant enough savings and investments that will support you in the later years? Some of this is done involuntarily for us through our retirement savings. But again, we will go into some discussions around how to augment your retirement savings with additional income. So the stark truth, some of us, we are all aware of the phase that we're going through in life, but some like to shy away from this, and it's inevitable whether you like to confront it or not. We start out, we're born, go to primary, secondary schools, obtain our degrees, and then we start working or doing business. So most of us are in the second line and probably in the earlier phase where, again, this is probably the accumulating phase where one just starts their career or where you start to grow the money. So the stark truth is that we are all tending in the same direction. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time and money, actually. So what are you doing with the time and what are you doing with the money you have so that when you get to the phase where you can no longer be productive, are you able to maintain your decent standard of living at that phase? Poll question 3. Oh, have you started investing towards retirement? So it's a simple yes or no question, and we would just like to get a layout of everyone here. Have you started investing for retirement? There's no wrong answer. We just want to see a sense of where we all are. Just a few more seconds. Yes. Okay. Yes, thank you for your honesty there. We see that of the poll respondents, about 64% have indeed started investing for retirement. We appreciate the honesty of those who, about 36%, have not actually started investing for retirement. So if there's one thing we're going to take away from here is that it's very important to start right away. Very important to make the plans for your retirement so that you do not get caught in financial difficulty. Thank you. So some challenging realities. There are some things that impede our desires or our plans towards preparing investment-wise for retirement. Jim Rohn said, it is very difficult to help someone who has no goals. We need to set goals and update our plans. So one challenging reality that a number of us face is ignorance or nonchalance about personal finance. We just maybe disregard the concept or just forget about the fact that there is something called personal finance that we need to pay attention to. Another is that employees are often passionate about their jobs, that they lose sight of their personal finance. And Mr. Koyebago did allude to this. He said, for instance, I heard him say he has some investment portfolios that he could not look at all until when he retired. He now decided, amongst other things, to start to rebalance his equity holdings and to see what's the best stocks to hold and those not to hold. So yes, this is a very real challenge, and we are encouraged to pay attention to those things even before retirement. Again, that's one of the things that we as fund managers do. So if you do not have the time, to give to your investment portfolios, you simply just need to contact us and let us do that worrying for you. The third challenge is lack of confidence in the financial market. No doubt many people have had their hands burnt right from the financial crisis of 2008 and even some earlier ones. But then again, that's why it's good to consult an investment professional. You know, if we have medical challenges, medical questions, we consult medical experts. If we have legal issues, we consult legal experts. With our investments, with our finances, we should avoid just taking blind shots or taking uninformed decisions. It's also good sense to consult investment experts for the best investment decisions. Too busy, no time to think about investment opportunities. Another challenge is procrastinating. Yes, you have the intention of getting into your personal finances, but some might say, I will start investing soon. I just need some more money. And the sixth challenge that, again, has been quite common is assuming retirement benefits will somehow be enough. So we sometimes do not give enough thought to this for the simple reason that you have a retirement savings account with one of the pension fund managers. There is a typical trait where upon retirement, the monthly disbursement from your retirement savings account may be anything from 10 to 20% of your usual monthly income, depending on how much you have been putting into that retirement savings account. So we'll go into that question in a bit more depth, but if you think about it, there's a social status that we get used to. As at the point of retirement, you were used to a certain social status, and just from the next month, if your income is significantly lower than what you earned the previous month, one may find themselves being unable to maintain the reasonable social status that have been used to. And this could again cause financial difficulty in retirement. We'll take a fourth poll question. So of the 6 challenges that we mentioned, let's hear from you, please. Which of these can you relate with? Ignorance about personal finance? Too passionate about your job to have time for personal finance? Lack of confidence in the financial markets? Procrastinating, assuming retirement benefits will somehow be enough? Let's give it a few more seconds, about 15. Thank you. We see many respondents, 51 out of 96. And we end the poll. Let's get one more. Great. So let's just end it there. Share results. Thank you again for your honest feedback. We see that the majority, about 56% of respondents, can relate with lack of confidence in financial markets. Okay. Yeah, so that's why informed decisions, informed risk taking is the best way to go. The financial markets have been here for a very long time. A lot of people have made a living and made a fortune off the financial markets. That continues to be the case, even in the depth of this COVID pandemic and how it is affecting different aspects of the financial market. There are opportunities to key into across the equity space and some alternative investment spaces. So investment professionals could and would be happy to work with you, such as ourselves, to identify these opportunities if you just make contact with us. So procrastinating was the next highest challenge, and followed by in equal portions, assuming retirement benefits will somehow be enough, and too passionate about your job to have time for investments. Thank you for your feedback. So how much money do you require in retirement? Now, this is a relative question. Or rather, the answer to this question is relative. And it's relative to the level of comfort, to the social standing, to the social status that one was used to. So, for instance, if the average monthly income over one's working life, say from 20 years old to 60 years old, if the average monthly income was, say, 400,000 naira, it's only reasonable that such a person, after the next month after retirement, you would still require 400,000 naira or thereabout to be comfortable in your retirement. Yes, there could be some expenses that have dropped, such as children's school fees, perhaps, or such as some other givens. But to a large extent, it's all about, as Mr. Koyebogu said, it's all about your comfort, maintaining the level of comfort that you were used to prior to retirement. So it simply means, on the other hand, also, if one's average income over the working life was, say, 800,000 naira, you would require something around 800,000 naira monthly, or at the least just slightly below that, to continue to be comfortable and to continue to maintain to a reasonable extent the social status that you were used to over your working life. So the question to ask, most of us have retirement savings accounts. How much is in your retirement savings account? If you project it to the end of your working life towards your retirement, how much will you be getting paid monthly from your retirement savings account? And the third question to ask is that amount anywhere close to your average monthly income? If the answer to these questions is no, then it means that you need to do something to augment your retirement savings. There's the issue of the voluntary contribution towards the same pension funds. There is the business, starting up a business right now so that you could augment your retirement earnings. And there's the third option, which we come in on. That's the issue of simply having an investment nest egg to augment your retirement savings with dividends and interest income. So what to do? The short answer is to contact us today. We are in Victoria Island and we are online. We have a phone number and email on display, so we could help you with a number of things. What we will do for you, we'll help set clear financial goals where financial goals have not yet been clearly set. We'll help you work on spending less than you earn to augment your income, because you need to increase your savings so that you can increase your investments and be better off in retirement. We'll help you work towards creating an emergency fund. We appreciate Mr. Koyebago's honesty. He did make mention of how health conditions significantly hit his cash flow, and that if not for his employer at the time, he would have been in some serious difficulty. So creating an emergency fund for medicals, for home, for car expenses, these are for some unforeseen expenses which you cannot predict or calculate, but there are some of the realities of life that come up once in a while. So it is necessary to have some funds at least that is set aside towards such emergencies, so that if or when they come, you could be prepared for them to some extent. We will help you develop systematic investment plans, again, such as your education plan. And one of the things that also Mr. Kenneth Bryan mentioned are systematic investment plans. If you go to quantumzenithasset.com.ng, you can go to planning. That's an example of the plans that we want to look at. Okay, so I clicked on planning, and you see goal SIP requirements, you see child education costs, and investment future values. So I'm going to child education costs and click calculate now. So this is a tool that we put here just to help us with one of the real financial considerations that we all go through. How many years from now will you need the money? So say I'm thinking of having a child in a university in 18 years time.
Yeah, help me plug it.
How many years from now will you need the money? I'll say 18 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so need that in 18 years. What course would you like to start saving for? Your child has expressed interest in engineering, for example. So we did a survey of several schools across Nigeria, the cost of a year studying those courses. Engineering on average came to about 895,000 naira. Engineering. So what is the duration of the course? Next question. And we say 5 years. Rate of return you expect on your investments. So the money that one is using to plan towards that investment outlay, that cost outlay in 18 years, if you assume, for instance, 10% is what you can get on it, given the current market situation, say calculate. Yeah, so we see the results here on the screen. What it means is that if I plan to send a child to school in 18 years to study engineering in university, there'll be a need to save 619,828 naira yearly, or 51,652 naira monthly, or 1,698 naira daily. So we have tools that can help you to be deliberate in your planning towards future investment outlays, towards future expenses. So we'll help develop systematic investment plans, which can help you meet several of your regular financial obligations and make you better ready for your retirement. One thing that our tool on the website showed us was the power of compounding. That's basically what we're working with. So if you consider several people, just think of it. If you start at 25 years old, saving 20,000 naira monthly at 10%, at a 10% annual rate of return, at the age of 60, one would have saved 76.5 million naira. You know, so the earlier one starts, the better towards all your financial needs, and that's the key to financial freedom in retirement. So we've come to an end, but I'd just like to take a last poll question. With your current monthly investments, do you believe you will be self-sufficient at 60 years old? With your current monthly investment, do you believe you will be self-sufficient at 60 years old? Thank you for staying with us this long. Sorry for the break in transmission earlier and the delays, but we're very close to the end. And thank you for still participating, even at this late stage, in the polls. Just giving it a few more seconds. Okay. All right. So with your current monthly investments, do you believe you will be self-sufficient at 60 years old? 10% say yes, 41% say no, and 49% say hard to tell. You know, I think if the answer is hard to tell, you should probably just say no as well. So 10% say yes, and 90% are not so sure. So this just highlights the need to be a lot more deliberate in our financial planning and in our investments towards retirement. The best time to start is as soon as one gets a stable source of income. 20 years old, 18 years old. It's a reality that we are going to face in future. So you need to take action now.
At the end.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. We've come to the end of the session, and if we had any questions, we'll take them now.
Okay. Ikechukwu, thank you so much for that presentation. We totally enjoyed it. We'll entertain some questions, live questions here. I have Mr. Kelebrai as well here to help us with the questions. Okay, the first question is from Mr. Stephen Adaji. He asks, what are the key indicators you watch out for in order to have a good retirement life? That is aside from the one you have mentioned. Secondly, what is the current age one has to become before accessing your pension under the new laws? Thirdly, what happens to retirement? Thirdly, what happens to the retirement you have contributed to National Housing Fund, and how do you access it? Mr. Kenebra, would you like to help us with those questions?
Okay, thank you, Stephen Adaji, for the question. The first question, what two factors which we in addition to what we have mentioned earlier, for me, I would say that your lifestyle and your health are two factors which are important in retirement. I have elderly parents, and who have been in retirement for some time, and I have had the opportunity to sit with them, especially during this the time of these coronavirus times. And what I've seen is that health is key. If you're not taking your health seriously, I think it's now time to start looking at it critically, because if you age, what happens is your health becomes a factor, and that could tilt the direction of how your retirement planning goes. Then to the second question, when can you start accessing the funds you contributed? It will depend on the fund if you are in the normal contributory pension scheme, you start at age of retirement is around 65, so you can start accessing afterwards. But you still have a window where you can access a certain portion of the funds before then. That's if you lose your job, and after 3 months or 3 or 4 months, you can now apply to your pension fund administrator with a letter of your disengagement letter. Based on that, you can access the funds. For those who are in the new scheme, that's the micro pension scheme for traders, artisans, and people who are in self-employment, you have a portion, that is a 40% portion, which is contingent. You can access that after contributing for 3 months. Then the other portion you can access when you're 50 years old. For the national health insurance, I believe that's the last question.
Yes, please.
There are two different things. Housing goes to the NHF, and that you have to apply for a mortgage, if I believe, before you can access that. So it's different from retirement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenebrai, for that. I have another question from Lola. She says, if the retirement fund set aside becomes inadequate at the time of retirement due to inflation, what happens next? Shouldn't the retirement funds plan be more than what we currently earn? So she's asking, okay, if I've set out some funds for my retirement, but then at retirement, these funds are not enough because of inflation. What do I do next? What happens next? Ikechukwu, would you like to approach that question?
Okay, so inflation is a factor that is always present, and the inflation concern starts from today, even much earlier than your retirement phase. So the simple answer to that is, on one hand, your retirement savings account, they do the best to at least beat inflation where that's possible in the market. So the kind of investments, the bonds and the treasury bills, and then to a lesser extent, the equities that your RSA goes into, they have targets that surpass inflation. So they make their best efforts to protect your RSA from inflation factors over the long term. But then a second point that now comes to the reason why it's necessary to augment your retirement savings with a deliberate investment pool. If you sit with us, we have different classes of investments with different levels of risk. So some are more risky and more rewarding than others. So we can even, for instance, give you the best exposures to equities, which over the long term are more likely to beat inflation. Brian mentioned the investment in real estate as well, which over the long term beats inflation, but we cannot all necessarily put funds that are required for real estate investments. So we have, for instance, our Zenith mutual funds, where with as little as 10,000 Naira investment, you are certain that you can put your investments in inflation hedging pools.
Okay, thank you, Ikechukwu. Thanks for that. I think we have one more question. Most of the questions we have here, we've answered one way or the other. This question is from Mr. Kenebrai. Mr. Ibidapo is asking, please explain in non-technical language the difference between fixed withdrawals and annuity for public officers. So what's the difference between fixed withdrawals and annuity for public officers in a non-technical language?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kenneth.
In non-technical language. Okay, all this will take place at retirement. So once you get to the age of retirement, what happens? If it's an annuity, your pension fund administrator pays that a portion of your investments contributed to an insurance company who owns an annuity plan. So that annuity plan would consider using annuity calculations the lifetime of most investors, and will now be paying you a fixed amount periodically. So that's what happens in the case of an annuity. Then for the usual pension scheme, you are entitled, I think you are paid out fully. Then you now make your own decision regarding where the funds go. Those are the difference. So the first one is you give it to an insurance firm who will now give you a guaranteed periodic payout every month during retirement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenebrai. Okay, this question is for you. So this question is from Ijoma Chioma. I think she knows about our product. So she's asking, what's the difference between the Zenith Money Market Fund and the Zenith Income Fund? What's the difference between those two funds?
If I quickly start with the similarity, they are both relatively low risk investments. So the key difference is that the money market fund, as the name implies, invests in money market instruments, specifically treasury bills, commercial papers, bank placements. So these are short tenured fixed income instruments, short tenured being less than a year. Consequently, you can use the money market fund for your shorter term financial planning. It's a suitable alternative to a simple savings account. So funds that you may need in anything from 1 to 6 months, you could save those monies in a money market fund. The income fund is also a fixed income investment pool, but the only difference is that it invests in longer tenured instruments as well as the short ones. So in addition to commercial papers and treasury bills, your income fund invests in bonds, federal government bonds, corporate bonds, the likes. So the key implication there is that under normal circumstances, without getting too technical, under normal circumstances, longer dated instruments yield more than shorter dated instruments. As a result, you can get a higher return typically on an income fund. But your income fund is more suited to your mid-term planning, as while the money market fund is more suited to short-term planning.
All right, thank you so much, Ikechukwu. All right, we're rounding off. I think we have 3 more questions and we end this webinar. This question is from Mr. Kenebrai. This question is from Oluwafemi Adegoke and is asking, can one's pension statement or can one's pension account statement be used as a collateral to access loan to start a business? So Adegoke is asking, can he use his pension account statement as a collateral to get a loan?
Not at the moment. I know there have been plans on the way since that was 2014 to make your pension accessible for a mortgage. So you could make an equity contribution in the mortgage. That's the only plan on ground.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kenebrai. I just want to ask one more question from here. Okay. Okay. So Chukwu Emeka is asking, do we have any investments currently right now that gives 10% and above returns annually? Do we have any investment right now in the financial sector that can give you 10%, or even maybe not even in the financial sector, that can give you more than 10% and above returns annually?
Well, right now, our Zenith Income Fund is sporting year-to-date annualized return of about 12.8%. So yes, that's above the 10%. But then, given the market situation, it's not really possible to do so much outside of the obtainable underlying assets. So treasury bills are currently yielding on average about 2.7%. The bonds are currently yielding on average about 8%, federal government bonds. So even if we were to find some corporate bonds, we may barely scratch 10% so that's just what's obtainable in the market. Now, if high return is what you want, that would need to align with your risk tolerance. So we do have several equity stocks that have dividend yields and earnings yields in excess of even that 12% right now. So if we sit with you to plan, we could identify the best investments for you. If you want investment returns higher than 10% right now, you should be willing to take the required risk with your investments. And I say that we say risk responsibly. So risk doesn't mean you should be afraid. It's calculated risk that we are trained to take. We've put in decades to analyzing and understanding the markets. So we could even identify and structure for you stock portfolios that are rather defensive in nature, that could give you some fairly stable earnings, which over the long term will certainly exceed inflation.
Thank you so much, Ikechukwu. To round off, I think we covered all the questions we have here, but I would just like if you could give us a brief summary of our 4 products and services that we offer. Because we have a question here asking us, what products, and you've talked about retirements, now understand more, but what products and services do you have that can help me with my retirement planning?
Okay, thank you. I don't know if, I believe you're still seeing my screen. Right now, we're showing the mutual funds that we have. There are 4 mutual funds currently. The Zenith Money Market Fund, which I've talked a little about. It's a low risk investment, or you may even classify it risk-free. It's more suited for your short-term savings. So expenses that you know you will need within a year, it's instead of the money earning nothing, you could have it in a money market fund and at least let it be earning some decent returns. And it's also easily accessible anytime within 24 hours after keeping it for a minimum of 30 days. So we have the Zenith Income Fund. Again, as I said earlier, it's also low risk and it's more suited for your medium-term planning. Under normal circumstances, in a normal market, your income fund will yield higher than your money market fund because of the exposure to bonds, corporate bonds and federal government bonds, in addition to the exposure to money market instruments. Then if you're willing to take on a bit more risk, we have the Zenith Equity Fund and the Zenith Ethical Fund. Those are both balanced funds, balanced in the sense that they invest in equities as well as fixed income instruments. So along the risk curve, equities over the long term could be more rewarding if the equity investment is done cautiously and with enough expertise. You certainly will get higher returns there than you will get with money market instruments and even with some bonds over the long term. So we have investments across those baskets. Those are different mutual funds where with as little as 10,000 Naira in some case or 25,000 Naira in some case, you could invest your money, and this could go into the specific financial planning objectives. So for instance, we've talked about augmenting your retirement savings. A perfect way to augment that would be with your Zenith Income Fund. Then again, depending on your age and how much longer you have in your working career, you may even be able to augment your retirement savings with some investments in our Zenith Equity Fund, which over the long term will give you positive returns. So we also have private portfolios, which we could structure. If you have the funds in a fairly sizable amount and you don't necessarily want to be tailored into any of these mutual funds, we could sit with you, understand your investment objective, your risk profile, and structure the assets and the weighting to the assets that we have in your investment basket.
Thank you so much, Ikechukwu. We have come to the end of this very insightful, very educative webinar. Again, I have to thank Mr. Kenebrai. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the knowledge you've given us today. We really appreciate it. Ikechukwu, thank you for that presentation. It was very insightful. I hope all of us have learned one thing or the other. Like I said before, the slides will be shared to our registered email. Also, the questions we couldn't answer live would also be answered via your registered email. Thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. Have a beautiful day.